Hello and welcome to this Connect and Learn session. These sessions have been funded by Seven Oaks District Council and are aimed at enhancing employment for local businesses in Seven Oaks District. And today we're diving into a topic that every business, big or small, needs to feel confident about. That's equity, diversity and inclusion. And we'll also be looking at how that links to mental well-being. I'm Ceri Hodgkiss. I'm the Training and Development Manager at West Kent Mind. We provide vital mental health support services in our community, but alongside that, we also provide a full raft of workplace wellbeing solutions for businesses of all kinds. If you are a small business owner, a leader, or in an SME, if you're a micro business, even a small trader, it can sometimes feel like EDI is something that's only meant for larger organizations with big staff teams and HR teams and big budgets. But inclusion is simply about people, and every business is built on people. When people feel safe, respected, and supported, they do their best work. So today I'm joined by Gemma of GFHR Consulting, and we're going to unpack what EDI really means for small businesses, how it links directly to mental health, and what practical steps you can start to take straight away. Welcome, Gemma. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be involved. So yes, I'm Gemma Farina. I run GFHR Consulting. We provide HR solutions for small businesses in and around the South East and Seven Oaks. Businesses of all sizes come to us for their HR needs, whether you're taking on your first employee right up to businesses of sort of 100 employees. So we offer a full scope. And what we really like to do is work with businesses that are really valuing the people that you work with in your business. So that's why doing things like this and talking about equality and diversity and inclusion is so important. So it's great to be part of this initiative.
Thanks, Gemma. So we're going to move into a bit of a question and answer, and we'll see how we get on. One of the first things that came to my mind was, do you think we've moved beyond equality, diversity and inclusion as a tick box? Do you think that everybody does now get it and how important it is?
I think there's been progress. I don't think that everyone is quite getting it yet. We're definitely seeing a shift in how workplaces operate and how they view equality. But for many employers, particularly those smaller employers, it still feels like a bit of a tick box. So unless it's an issue that you actually have in your business, I think people kind of go, I don't really need to worry about that. But you absolutely do. It applies to everyone. So I think it's really important that we do sessions like this to really raise awareness and think about how we can make businesses of all sizes feel fair and equitable and bring that kind of safety to the places where we work. And I think the more that we have these sorts of conversations, it enhances our understanding and knowledge, and ultimately that's what it has to be all about. The more we talk about it, the more people become aware.
Definitely. And the more people realise that it can't be something that's just reactive, that, as you say, oh, we've got a problem. Oh, no, we need to think about this. Something proactive and those very deliberate things that are put in place to prevent these problems happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that applies to businesses of all sizes. It's not just large corporates with lots of employers, it's every single business owner. Are there risks? Are there specific risks when small employers assume that they don't need to think about EDI?
Yeah, there's always going to be risks, and the sort of legal compliance gaps that come from not thinking about equality and diversity in the workplace is can be really costly for businesses if they get it wrong. And that law doesn't discriminate against large and small businesses. It applies to everyone. So it's kind of, I think, where we get into this scenario of having it's a tick box, it can increase that risk because there isn't the preparation, there isn't the thought. So those sort of claims do come out of nowhere, and if small businesses aren't prepared and haven't thought about it, then it can then have a much more devastating impact, because they haven't got the funds to spend on it to get it right and to put the right things in place. And it doesn't need to be complex. It can be quite straightforward, but having that awareness and thinking about it and talking to your people about how inclusion affects them has an ongoing impact, and it affects small businesses' reputation, because people want to be viewed as inclusive, and if you're trying to recruit, which can be really difficult, making sure that you're coming across in the right way and your culture and values are all reflected in that is all part of having that inclusive workforce.
And a small investment can save dramatic amounts of money in the future.
Absolutely, and it doesn't need to be big investment stuff. We can talk about sort of smaller things that businesses can do, but it's such a big impact, that it has to be something that small businesses think about as well, and don't just sort of go, oh, it's large businesses only. Absolutely not. So yeah, I think it's really important that we get it right and the impact of that. I guess from your perspective, is there a link with mental health, and how does that impact well-being in small teams?
There is definitely a link, and I know that more and more businesses are understanding that they have to create psychological safety. When I first started in the sort of mental health training field 8-9 years ago, I don't think I'd ever heard the term psychological safety, but it's becoming much more widely used and much more understood. That idea of creating safe workplaces where people feel supported and heard and able to speak up without fear of judgment or recrimination or blame and discrimination as well. And so creating equality in a workplace, accepting a diverse workforce, creating that truly inclusive environment where people feel that they belong is part of creating that psychological safety, which very much links into the idea of feeling safe to be yourself, to experience health difficulties, whether that's physical health difficulties or mental health difficulties, to need support. It really strengthens the sort of work against the adverse effects of stress, because people feel able to speak up. They feel able to say, I need some support, and the earlier they're able to say that, the better it is for recovery outcomes, and the quicker the recovery, the sooner somebody gets help, the quicker their recovery. So that inclusivity, that sense of belonging, that sense of safety to speak up is vital for better mental health in workplaces and everywhere. We also know that discrimination and inequality is a real risk factor for experiences of mental health problems. And conversely, inclusion, belonging, it's a real protective factor for well-being. It creates happier employees, and that absolutely links back to the business case for it as well. So there really is that human link between inclusion and better mental well-being. Yeah. And it has to be built into all processes within an organisation, I think, from stress risk assessments to things like wellness action plans, where you can really create those conversations where it's okay for people to speak up and say what they need and ask for things like reasonable adjustments. So it has to be built into all processes. And I would say, I'm sure you agree, that's from recruitment. You mentioned recruitment. What are some things that could be thought about in job adverts or interviews that make a difference?
So yeah, I think recruitment, it comes down to being very clear in your job descriptions about what is the expectations of the role, using really clean language, not kind of bombarding people with jargon or having a job advert that's really filled with jargon. not having wording or phrases that could be construed, even if it's not meant to be, as discriminatory in its terms or the way it comes across. Making people aware that reasonable adjustments are okay, and thinking about what those reasonable adjustments might be. And it could be that you have interviews held in different ways. It could be that you provide questions ahead of the interview to allow for time to process and be able to answer those questions. It could be that obviously there's physical attributes as well. So it could be, I've done interviews before where someone's been typing the answers, and we've done it via typing. So there's lots of things that you can think about, but it doesn't all have to be costly. But then it's really then when they join at day one, actually understanding what does that person need to help them succeed in the work environment that they are in. What do we need to put in place to support them? And I think during the pandemic, we really saw a shift as well with people that were really benefiting from working from home and having their own space as opposed to having to go into the office. So, and some people prefer to go in the office. So it's all about thinking about how individuals work best, and what accommodations we can make around that. And the wellness action plans, I think, is a brilliant idea. Everyone should have one of what needs to happen for you to do your best work. A number of people that have sort of headphones to help them focus with music, you don't necessarily want it in the office, but actually for that individual it might just help them then get focused, or they want to be in a quieter room, or they need that time to work from home sometimes to allow them to balance from the commute. There's all sorts of things that we can think about.
I agree, and it's really around that idea of what can an employer provide to help somebody be as happy, motivated, engaged, creative, productive in their role. And that should be a real driving force. I think there is a misunderstanding that as we've both mentioned, that adjustments cost a lot of money, and they don't always. It can be the small things that don't cost. But I think there's also perhaps a misunderstanding that flexibility around hours, location, etc. might compromise overall productivity. Are there any other ideas around those sort of adjustments that don't risk service delivery, that don't compromise output or quality of work?
I think it all has to be looked at on an individual basis, and I think that's the key thing, and on the job basis as well. So what job is actually needing to be done, and what can be done? So there is, yes, as you say, flexibility of timing. Well, actually, if you can have someone come in a bit later that avoids a commute time, that might work for a certain job. But actually, if you've got someone that needs to start on reception at 9 o'clock, that's not going to work. So, but is there someone else that could cover that hour to allow someone else to start at 10? It's all thinking about ways to make those adjustments to make it feel more achievable for someone, and for someone to be able to do their best work for you. So, having regular check-ins, things like that might be a good idea, so that people have that space to be able to say, actually, this isn't working for me in the same way, or actually, this has shifted for me. And I think that's something that you would expect for everyone. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a line manager relationship. It could be another peer, or it doesn't have to be HR. So, having someone, you talked about psychological safety earlier, having someone that you feel safe with to be able to share, this is what I'm struggling with. They might be able to help you come up with a way to advocate for yourself, or they might be able to support you in the advocation themselves. So, those sorts of things are, but really for me, it all comes down to having the open-mindedness to be flexible, and also that key communication around that as well, which I think is so important.
It is. That communication means that there can be a real collaborative approach to that flexibility and to those reasonable adjustments. This isn't about people asking to work a 2-day week but be paid for a 5-day week. It's about those reasonable compromises that work for the business but also mean that the person is happy, motivated, and they want to stay with the business, because we know that things like a commitment to EDI, a commitment to better mental health in the workplace, these improve staff retention, they reduce turnover. So you keep your workforce, you don't have the costs of replacing people. It all makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. And I think there's a lot of nervousness around the reasonable adjustments. People kind of go, oh, well, I don't know what they are, or I'm not an expert. And I think there's no requirement to be an expert in any particular field, whether we're talking about mental or physical health. You don't have to be an expert, but it's opening up to the conversation so that someone feels that they can approach, and then you can think about together what those adjustments might be, what works in your workplace, because there obviously is a business need here, and a lot of people will push back and go, well, I'm trying to run a business here. Well, yes, you are, but you want people to feel like they belong in that workplace, and that all adds to their culture. But it's not about needing to then go and be a medical specialist or mental health specialist or a physical health specialist. It's about knowing that there is a conversation to be had, and then going and finding the resources or the experts to be able to support you in having that conversation and understanding what needs to be done.
Yeah.
So what do you think about so obviously small businesses, you've got people who might be sole traders, so they haven't got any staff. Why, how do we include ED&I practice there?
It's vital to do it, because the business, the sole trader might not have staff, they might not even have subcontractors, but in one way or another they'll have customers, and they will have suppliers or clients, whatever you want to call it. They're working with people. So for me, it comes back to that idea that it is about people, and it is about opening a business up to as wide a customer pool as possible. So making it as accessible as possible for the widest possible customer pool. That's got to make good business sense. It's also about creating loyalty in your existing customer base, because statistics and all sorts of studies show that customers who don't feel supported, or feel that a business of whatever size doesn't care about EDI, they don't stay with that business. They will leave and look for an alternative business. More and more customers are concerned about diversity and inclusion. They're concerned about the environmental impact of the business. They're concerned about all sorts of social aspects of business, as well as actually the service that it provides. So being able to demonstrate that commitment to equality, to inclusion, to belonging, to supporting customers, to supporting clients, to supporting suppliers who might have different needs, different viewpoints, etc. It is vital. And it's perhaps harder when there isn't a staff team. It's perhaps harder when there isn't an HR person. I think maybe for businesses of all kinds, there are practical steps to build it into that kind of day-to-day culture, including those open lines of communication. So sort of start, I think, for sole traders, micro businesses, they can't have that communication with staff members necessarily, but they can get feedback from their customers. What do you need? What do you think of our website? What do you think of our booking process? So actually getting that feedback can help to create that collaboration around, well, maybe we could improve this. Maybe we could actually make this process more inclusive for a wider customer base. Maybe we could make our retail space more inclusive for a wider customer base. it's not a deliberate, I would say it's not that people deliberately want to exclude anybody.
No.
It is just that they're not sure what to do. What about you? What do you think are some other sort of practical steps for embedding that good practice into day-to-day culture?
Yeah, I think you're right. Asking for customer feedback and is a great idea. And I guess the challenge, we see it in the large corporates, don't you? I've seen it over the recent years. You know, you go to the shopping centre and there's a quiet hour. Everywhere's expected to have ramps and make spaces accessible. But for a small business, you don't know what those premises are or how that might impact it for physical health. Yes, you can have quieter spaces, or you could have, you know, slightly different opening times, things like that. But it is about getting that feedback and understanding what do those individuals need, and having that regular review point as well. So kind of creating those clear values, being consistent. I think that's the thing we don't talk about enough. So thinking about if you did have an employee, or you did have someone that came in and needed some adjustments, are we treating that person in a consistent manner? Are we having the same conversation and thinking about how we treat that person with respect and dignity and fairness, and having those sorts of conversations to ensure that it is consistent? I think doing things like this, so actually business owners making themselves aware by listening into our conversation and kind of going, okay, how do I take this away and make this relevant in my business? What can I do that makes it relevant in my business? So yeah, I think it's all sort of progress that we're gradually making, and having those conversations, enhancing your understanding, is all gonna make a difference. But I guess the challenge is, you know, where many SME leaders are really sort of stretched thin, how do leaders of businesses embed ED in well-being and the impact of ED&I, fairness? How do they embed that in their businesses and look after their own mental health as well? As you alluded to at the beginning, you know, being a business owner can be quite difficult.
Absolutely, and juggling so many different things, and that's in the business, but you know, life outside of the business as well.
Yeah.
Although I suspect for many people there is no balance. It's all business. But it is really important that leaders do think about their well-being, because the impact of poor mental well-being on their approach to equality, diversity, and inclusion could be quite negative. Because if you think about when you're feeling under huge amounts of pressure, you're feeling really stressed and stretched, and a bit irritable and anxious, and if somebody comes to you asking for something, you're not likely to respond in the most empathetic, compassionate, and fair way. Actually, it's potentially going to meet with, I don't have time for this, don't ask me today. Which, you know, as a one-off, we all snap like that sometimes, but it's not the best approach. It's not the fairest approach, and actually it could get a leader into significant difficulties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, being able to approach these things with that calmness, and like you said, that consistency, where it's the small daily commitments, the consistency that are far more powerful than the grand gestures, means that absolutely business owners, sole traders, leaders of businesses of all sizes do need to look after their own mental health in order to be the best leader that they can be. And I think sometimes business leaders are the worst at that, because it feels like a luxury. That idea of protecting and promoting and supporting your own mental well-being feels like a luxury. It feels like a nice to have, but it's not a necessity, when actually it is the most important thing. So it has to be that idea of what do I need to make myself as well, as strong, as resilient, as calm, as capable, as compassionate as possible, because I'm then the best possible leader. And a lot of that boils down to self-awareness, to thinking about how am I doing? Am I struggling? What do I need? It's about those self-care strategies, which are everything from the boring stuff, what you put in your body, what you eat, how much water you drink, limiting the, the alcohol and the caffeine. It's about moving your body. It's about time for rest and reflection. It's about balance. It's about creating really effective boundaries around work, personal, home, family. It's really important. And then it's also the idea of being open to seeking support, of being open to saying, I can't do this all by myself. I do need some support in whatever aspect of life that might be, whether it's mental health support or whether actually it's, I need somebody to take this off me so that I can take an hour out to do something else, to go to the gym, to do a yoga class, whatever that is. And I think that has to all be in combination, and it has to be a commitment to putting yourself first, which isn't selfish. It's about creating the healthiest, best version of yourself so that you are then the best leader you can possibly be. So yes, I think
it comes back to that. Like they say on the aeroplanes, put your own mask on first before you put masks on for others. You've got to take care of yourself, and
you've got to. We know that statistics for stress, burnout, and other mental health difficulties in leaders are high, because there's that drive, there's that motivation, but without a really, really solid base of self-awareness and self-care and support seeking, there is that risk of pushing too far and leading to burnout. So yeah, vital. And sometimes we're really good at it and sometimes we're not so good at it. But again, it has to be that consistent commitment.
Absolutely.
And again, it's about that idea that it doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money, but those small daily commitments, those consistent commitments to equality, diversity and inclusion, to self-care, to mental health support, go a lot further than the occasional grand gestures, I would suggest.
Absolutely, completely agree.
If you were going to suggest one next step to small employers who I hope have taken some really good thoughts from today, from this discussion, but if there was one next step, what would it be?
I think it would be communication. Ask the people around you, be it your customers, be it your employees, be it your subcontractors, whoever is in the orbit, the people who are in the orbit of your business, what helps you to feel included, and able to do your best work, and therefore what can we do to support that. That would probably be the one thing that I would go and do, is have that conversation, because again, I think it comes back to that inclusion grows from understanding, not perfect results, not spending lots of money. It's understanding, and I think if we can keep having those conversations and enhancing our understanding, it will help more people to have more inclusive workplaces.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Gemma. That sounds like a great next step. Thank you all for listening. In terms of next steps for you, our next session is on Thursday, the 5th of March at 6 p.m. in Sevenoaks. Final venue will be communicated this week, and that will be around self-care for business owners. So actually our start of a discussion today about what business owners can do to look after themselves is just a little taster of what's to come on that session in March. A huge thank you to Gemma. If you are looking for HR support, please do reach out to Gemma and the team at GFHR Consulting. We've been working with them for a number of years, and I know that is a real commitment to wellbeing and EDI within your own team as well as for other businesses, which is always wonderful to see.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to be involved.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.